And my nervous system was constantly in fight or flight mode because I grew up in a highly chaotic environment and for so many reasons. Like we moved a lot. My father struggled, my mother struggled. Like they had their own struggle that then impacted the environment at home. And I feel strange kind of talking about that in a public platform, but they had their own stuff, right? And so that came out in different ways, like explosive ways and chaotic ways and trying like the second person that's going to trigger you the most is going to be your partner, right? And so they were constantly triggering each other and they were constantly triggered by us, and back then there were no resources or information to help them know otherwise, right? And so it a lot of people are going to be listening and be like, I don't have a traumatic childhood. This doesn't apply to me. And that's how I felt. But I learned that when you're a little child, that felt really, really, really scary and really, really unsafe and like death. And now, anytime that my nervous system gets reminded of this, then I'm still in that mode. And because chaos was the norm, now then later in life, I sought chaos because like peace did not feel normal. It felt scary, like something bad was going to happen, any moment.
Are you an ambitious leader ready to break through limiting beliefs, align with your purpose, and thrive in your career without sacrificing your well being or postponing your true desires? I'm Diana Ordonez, certified high performance coach and your host. Each week, we'll dive into actionable insights and research based strategies to help you unlock clarity, build unshakable confidence, and take courageous action toward a life of impact and fulfillment. If you're ready to overcome fear, embrace growth, and step boldly into your next level, you're in the right place. Let's create a life filled with courage and purpose together.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Courage and Purpose podcast. In today's episode, I am joined by my good friend and returning guest, Carolina Sizemore, who is a transformational coach and writer who helps women discover their purpose and live their fairy tale. In today's episode, you're going to be listening in on a recent conversation that we had on a call. In this conversation, we dive into nervous system regulation. We talk about perfectionism. We also discuss how to discover what our patterns are and how to find our way out of them to finally see our own worth and stop the patterns that lead to burnout. So without telling you everything about the episode, let's just dive in and give you an opportunity to hear this powerful conversation.
For me, in 2018, I was kind of in this space where I thought I had the career that I wanted, making the money that I was making, that I worked really hard for, right? I had multiple promotions. I had a supportive husband, a beautiful daughter, and I thought on the surface my life looked perfect. I was heading a great team. I was a director of product management and marketing in a med tech company. So it seemed like I had it made. And yet I really felt very unfulfilled. I was not happy. And I thought maybe I'll get another job or maybe, if I could just fix something outside myself, this can get magically better, right?
Right.
And I had been striving for so long to achieve the next thing, but yet I still felt like I wasn't a good enough mom. I wasn't a good enough wife. I wasn't a good enough worker. My presentations weren't as great as they could be. My leadership wasn't as great as it could be. And it was just like I was very unhappy with myself, and it felt like I wasn't playing any of the roles in my life, you know, at at even a good level, right? Like I didn't even consider it enough. And I think a lot of us have an experience like that. For me, that was the beginning of like my entire personal development journey, right? It changed everything when my husband's two best friends passed away suddenly. And I was like, wait, this cannot be how I keep living my life. Like I have to figure this out. And so I know you mentioned, Carolina, you had a time in your life where you struggled with something, a similar feeling, right?
Yeah, that's so interesting because it makes me think of what we're pursuing. in the first place because I'm like you. I had the big house, I had the nice car, I had the external appearances of everything being that perfect life as well, but I wasn't happy either. And so it really makes me think if that's the goal, like how much do we have to do until we arrived, or what's the point of doing all of this stuff? Like you said, having all those titles, having all those achievements. Is it going to take a bigger house or a nicer car? Like, what is it going to take for us to feel fulfilled, or even to feel like we've arrived or made it and we're just striving for what? A vapor?
Right. Yeah. Like I definitely asked myself that question. Like, is this really all there is? Is this really what I wanted? Like, and I do know that it felt intentional at the time. Like I came from a very I wasn't in poverty my whole life, right? I only had that brief window from, the time that I was born to probably when I was maybe like 14, where we were really kind of struggling. But I knew, and those were formative years. Those were years where I really was determined to create a life for my daughter that was not the life that I had, right? And so it felt intentional to me to like have the house that I didn't have growing up, to live a life of not, the opposite of scarcity, because it wasn't abundance either, because I was still living in this mindset of, I can't spend too much. I can't do all these things because I'm trying to avoid that life I had. And so, but I got to go on vacations, which is what I wanted growing up, right? Like, why can't we see the world? Why can't we? And then I did, and so it felt very intentional. And yet, as I went through this process, I started to recognize that the purpose of it all was not only just that I was avoiding something, but also I was trying to like soothe an internal like subconscious belief about myself, and it all came from before I could even decide for myself, right? Like I was wired this way from childhood. I learned this behavior, and so that allowed me to make some major shifts.
I wouldn't label myself a high achiever, right? We had this conversation, and but I've still had the same experiences or similar experiences, and I think we're going to talk about that in a little while as well. Like, or mine is more like I don't accomplish the things. I'm not achieving all the things because they have to be perfect before I move forward. So that's, that's a different issue. But I want to know, like, when you recognize that, because you said, you recognize that fact. What did you actually do, or when exactly did you experience the breakthrough? What did that look like?
Oh, there's a lot to that question, because even what you said about I never did achieve the things because I was always trying to make it perfect, and so I never took the action. It's interesting because while I was achieving the things, it still was never perfect, and so I still never acknowledged any of it. Like it never felt like I could celebrate the fact that I achieved anything. It was always like, that's fine, but it wasn't, I didn't have the 4.0 GPA, or I didn't have, I didn't have the perfect talk because I had too many filler words, or I didn't make the next level of salary. Like whatever it was that was missing was always where my focus went. And so yes, I was achieving things, but it never felt like I was achieving anything because it was never perfect. And so it was never like I could feel good about it. And interestingly enough, that's what felt comfortable to me, was like, I'm never achieving enough. This feels familiar. This is good. So I found a workplace that really mirrored that same behavior and that same thought process. And so it was like our nervous system seeks out what's familiar. And the moment that I think changed everything was a moment that took a long time. And I think before we go into that, because there's so much to the breakthrough moment where I could finally recognize, hey, look at everything that you have been able to do and how you've, gone through this experience that was really difficult and how you look like really see what I did. Because before that, I had other people, right? My boss, my significant other that would be able to say to me, you're doing really well. And that would only satisfy me for the moment, right? And so the breakthrough for me was when I was finally able to see myself, because for as long as I couldn't see myself, no amount of anybody else acknowledging me or validating me was going to be enough. And that's why I never felt like I was enough, because I couldn't acknowledge myself. I couldn't see myself. I couldn't validate myself. It didn't matter what external person said something or what external achievement I received, whether it was recognition or a salary or a promotion or the house, whatever external thing that was supposed to signal to me that it was success was never going to be enough because I didn't internally believe it myself. And part of it was I wanted to feel worthy, right? And so we all have just intrinsic worth. And I was trying to earn worth because of the way I grew up, right? And I know you've had also some similar experiences in your childhood. I think we minimize what an impact that makes on our adult selves.
Yeah, and we talked about that, like both of us having kids, being able to go through this process, especially as coaches, and recognize what has pivoted our mindsets or what we've learned and what we've recognized along the way that it isn't external. We're not going to get that validation externally if we don't know and value ourselves internally. And we recognize like what we can pass on to the next generations if we don't address it in ourselves. And so I think that's why this podcast is so important, because one of the things that I recognized were like these things that I carried on for generations. And once you identify them, it's like, no, you are doing the great things. You are getting, having all of the accomplishments and getting all of the awards, but not being able to like celebrate the fact that you've accomplished this because it's not ever good enough. Because I felt, and whether it's a truth or a lie, I believed that nothing was ever good enough. That was my experience that I brought in from my childhood. And that's not true. When we are accomplishing, like getting that medal or getting that award or getting that new job title or whatever it is, that external thing that should validate us, if we're not recognizing that and celebrating that at the moment, then we're teaching the next generation. And that was the thing that I talked about when we were talking about celebrating wins, that I recognized for a friend of mine yesterday, what she was modeling for her daughter, yeah, because we don't recognize that. It's like, are we going to recognize, the work that we've done, and they're going to see us go like, oh, wait a minute, step back. And it's like, oh, I'm a high achiever, but I know, what my value is. And that's what I wanted to touch on, because when that realization came, how did you learn to recognize that it was internal validation and not external?
I love what you said about what are we teaching our kids, because that really was the reason it became so important to me to address like that something needed to change, because I realized, first of all, if you have kids, you know that kids are very triggering. They trigger all our internal ch little selves, little childhood selves, because we see ourselves in them. And so while I was kind of coasting along, the problems became really obvious once I was a mom, because first of all, like the anger was coming out in ways that I had not really been aware of, because she's my little baby girl, and I and I don't want to like be so like angry towards her. It's different when like you live with your own anger, but now you see yourself like taking it out on your child and you're like, what is happening? Why am I so enraged at something seemingly like not, not that I don't want to be enraged about? And it's because it reminds our nervous system of a time where we were not safe. And I think that's probably the one of the most important things. I think number one on my list for ways that I started to address my old patterns was to like having an understanding of how my nervous system works and how it was programmed. Because, like I said, our nervous system gets wired at a time where we had no like choice. We didn't have power to say, oh, I feel this way, but I'm going to choose to respond this other way, right? We were little kids and we were scared out of our minds, and the person that's responsible for our well-being is the person that we rely entirely on is like displaying behavior that signals to us that we aren't safe, that our needs aren't going to be met, our emotional needs, not just our physical needs, sometimes even our physical needs. And so it feels like death to us because it's very unsafe for a little child to be on their own, right? To be alone in that. And so when our nervous system gets reminded of that very traumatic experience, even like I remember in therapy kind of brushing some of these things off, like it wasn't that bad, I was fine. This shouldn't be an issue right now. Like we don't need to talk about this. I'm totally over that. Right. And it's like, okay, mentally, maybe I want to be over it, but my nervous system is totally not over it. Like I'm receiving the sensory information that is telling my nervous system to get in fight or flight mode
Yes.
right now. And so before I could have a thought about it. And so the first thing that I learned was that it doesn't matter how much thought work I do, my nervous system is still going to run the show if I don't learn to regulate it. And my nervous system was constantly in fight or flight mode because I grew up in a highly chaotic environment, and for so many reasons. Like we moved a lot. My father struggled, my mother struggled. Like they had their own struggle that then impacted the environment at home. And I feel strange kind of talking about that in a public platform, but they had their own stuff, right? And so that came out in different ways, like explosive ways and chaotic ways, and trying like the second person that's going to trigger you the most is going to be your partner, right? And so they were constantly triggering each other, and they were constantly triggered by us. And back then there were no resources or information to help them know otherwise, right? And so it a lot of people are going to be listening and be like, I don't have a traumatic childhood. This doesn't apply to me. And that's how I felt. But I learned that when you're a little child, that felt really, really, really scary and really, really unsafe and like death. And now, anytime that my nervous system gets reminded of this, then I'm still in that mode. And because chaos was the norm, now then later in life, I sought chaos because like peace did not feel normal. It felt scary, like something bad was going to happen, any moment. The other shoe's going to drop. So I would like seek out creating stressful environment for myself, chaos. I would, like just keep adding more, like grad school and promotion, and now kid, like, and it felt normal. But when your nervous system is constantly heightened like that, you are not operating at your, full functional mode. You're highly triggered by things and edgy and angry, and you're operating like your little childhood self. And so I started to learn about somatic methods. I started to really start taking care of my body and mind in ways that supported my nervous system, even the food you eat and exercising, like that energy stuck in my body. There's no other way to get it out other than crying and running and dancing and yoga and ways to process out that energy from my body that before I would like be very like judgmental about like, well, I don't know why I'm crying. I shouldn't be crying right now. This doesn't make sense. Right? And so like just even learning to regulate my emotions by allowing the energy to move through me. There's times where uh, I had very unhealthy perceptions of anger in my home, right? What anger meant as an emotion and how we should avoid it and stuff like that. And so, and crying was to be avoided also. And so, just even understanding that anger wasn't the problem. It was how the behavior that came with that anger was being hurtful. And so sometimes, yeah, I have to shut the door of my room and like scream into a pillow so that I don't go scream at my child. You know what I mean? And so it is necessary to release the energy. It's just about doing it in a healthy way. Um, because what ends up happening is you bottle it up and then it's like stuck in your system and then you blow up in other ways. And so just the understanding of how the nervous system works and then how to support the nervous system was really one of the breakthrough moments for me. I learned all about, um, EFT tapping and breath work and um, just even the ability to calm my nervous system by signaling safety through touch and massage and feel. And there are times now that I get triggered in social situations, well, I'll just go through like a series of all my tools, right? And so for those that have been listening before, like EMDR was a big way for me to be able to access deep-rooted memories and to process them out emotionally while still having access to my rational mind because it activates both sides of the brain. And so you can kind of model or have the same effect that EMDR has by stimulating both sides of the brain, either by walking, running, or just even a butterfly hug when you tap slowly on either side of your arms, hugging myself, like fetal position on the ground, but like in a public setting, it's very easy to just kind of like not, go unnoticed and tap. Like I was at a wedding and my childhood wounds, like I have so much awareness now, but there was a time where I didn't understand, like, why am I so overwhelmed? And it would come out in anger or passive aggressive behavior or just wanting to run away. Like, I gotta leave, right? I don't want to be here. And so that overwhelm of my nervous system, I excused myself, go to the bathroom, cried it out, even if I think like I don't judge it anymore. Like I don't try to decide why am I crying? What's wrong with me? That only prolongs the healing process. And so I just need to cry right now. That's what my body needs. And I'll do some tapping or EFT tapping is the emotional freedom technique. So if you look that up, it'll walk you through what the points are. It's a sequence of points, acupressure points that really soothe the nervous system. And it's just like very subtle, right? And so nobody needs to know, but it helps me like calm my nervous system. And once that wave of emotion passes, I am able to more rationally think about my problem because when you're in fight or flight mode, like I was so much of the time in that high like pressure career, how it's like you don't make good decisions and everything feels like a calamity, right? Like, oh, something unexpected happened. Like I have to go pick up my daughter from daycare early, and it was like the worst thing, imaginable. It's like, oh my God, now what am I gonna do? And it just felt even like the stress would pile on further. And then for those of you that think that they're like lazy because they find themselves on the couch on their phone trying to cope with all the stress, like that's because you are no longer like in this fight or flight mode. You have surpassed the amount of stress that your nervous system is able to like process at all, and you're in freeze state now. And the more you judge yourself, the more your nervous system is like not safe, not safe. And it is just like recreating those patterns, understanding how my nervous system was not allowing me to get unstuck was probably one of the biggest breakthroughs because even though I had started down this journey of personal development, I learned all about my thoughts and my energy, right? Like have good energy. What do I focus on? Things like that. I was not addressing my body at all. I was so disconnected from my body. I didn't understand what was going on in my body. I couldn't even tell you, to pay attention, like, what do I feel? I don't know what I feel. It's like, okay, there's pressure on my chest. I could feel my heart is pounding pretty loud, or I'm clenching my fists, or my shoulders are up tight. It was like, okay, now that I can pay attention to my body, I can also understand what my body needs. And so that is a really long, drawn out answer. But it deserves attention because I think that was probably my biggest blind spot. I didn't even learn about it till after my late husband passed because I started reading the books and the thought work and all that. But once my late husband passed, it really opened up all my core wounds of abandonment and all my childhood stuff came out in a way that really required that I address my subconscious beliefs and now it was just me and Mia. And so back to what I was originally saying is like it was just me and her and I needed to make sure that she learned like positive behaviors from me because I realized I'm turning into my parents. Like what is happening? I don't want to be that. And so it really drove me to do the work, to learn what I was missing. Um, yeah, I think that's a lot, but I don't know what your what was your breakthrough moment?
Well, and I was thinking about something that you said because I feel like a lot of people that are out there doing all the things and they're pushing themselves, it's because of what you said. It's like we've grown accustomed to the chaos and we're not paying attention to our bodies. We're not recognizing the signs and the symptoms so that we can deal with it. And I told you, like, I'm the same way. I'll just find myself like with and I don't even notice until like I'm driving and then I was like, oh, my shoulders are like in this tense place and it's like put them down or until it comes to a place where I have such pain because they've been in this heightened state, of pain or the same thing with my hands, you mentioned that the clenched fists or whatever. I mean, I think people need to start paying attention, listening to the signals that are coming from their body because we're pushing forward. I mean, we're just like striving for all of these things and not recognizing what we're doing to our own selves. And so I think that, I didn't have a breakdown. I did have an incident with a panic attack one time when I was driving, and I was like, yeah, that could be a whole conversation. But if we didn't stop to recognize these symptoms ahead of time, and I think that's the warning of this, especially for high achievers, it's like you're not going to keep going until you have a heart attack and then you've accomplished the great thing, or you don't keep going until you have that excruciating pain or until something tragic happens, like you have a breakdown or a meltdown. I mean, that is not healthy, but that's also not the end goal. So paying attention to those signs. But what I was thinking was you said something so profound because we were talking about the external things. We're striving for the external things, but sometimes we're all also striving for the external acknowledgement. And one thing that I remember you saying was how you were beating yourself up and you had to learn to talk to yourself differently. And what did that look like and how did that shift your motivation or your responses?
Yeah. So, I would get some external like validation. It was never enough. What did that look like? It looked like, oh, you did such a great presentation. And then I would be like, yeah, but I had a lot of ums and likes. And I also didn't mention that one thing that I wanted to mention. And that person didn't respond well to this point. Like that's what it would sound like, right? Like I would find all the ways to rip myself apart and that was the case for everything, right? And I would just like really hone in on everything that I did not good enough, not well enough, and asking more of myself. Like, and it was always like, well, you could have done this better, or you could have done that better. And I didn't really understand what it meant to speak, because you get this advice all the time, right? Like, speak to yourself like you would your best friend. And I'm just like, it didn't really resonate for me. I was like, I don't know. I would probably tell my best friend to, you know, go after their goals. That's all I'm doing. Like, I'm just having bigger goals. There's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. I don't understand what you're saying. Right. And the thing that changed for me is I started to reflect on what is it that I really want? Like, because at the time I was in a relationship where I felt like I wasn't seen, and I felt really lonely in that relationship. And I'm like, what is it that I want from this person? Like, I don't even know, like, why. Like, they tell me give yourself what you hope to receive, right? Like, meet your own need, right? And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And then I was like, well, I seem to think this is gonna sound so funny. I seem to think I'm a pretty good partner. I seem to think that I'm a very loving partner that you know, and I had already had a relationship where I was very happy, right? Like, my late husband, I felt really gave me a lot of encouragement, a lot of support. And it was like, well, I just kind of wanted that, right? But it was gone now. And so I had to be that for me. But it was about, okay, how do I get it out of my head long enough to give myself the thing that I give to other people so freely? Right? How do I do that? So I had to like pretend that the person that I was with, like my partner, or the person that I was with had my life. Like, I had this imaginary relationship, and this person had my life and accomplished all the things that I had accomplished, and lived the life that I had lived, and gone through the struggles that I had gone. Like, I had to like pretend I'm not me, I'm someone else, and I love this person very much. Right? They're my partner, and I want to be supportive of them, and I want to give them what I so desperately crave. How would I do that? And so I wrote it down in a letter so that I wouldn't keep fighting it, keep fighting not wanting to say those things about myself. And I found myself like in tears, because when I was writing, I kept like recognizing it, and it got easier as I got along. So I really encourage anybody that is struggling with this, like, to think of who's the person that you really like love and show up for all the time, and to pretend that they have your life, you're exactly as it is, but put it outside of yourself and see if that makes it any easier. I wrote it down, and I started to like realize, if I was someone else, I would be so compassionate and empathetic, and I would recognize, like, hey, you just went through a major life-changing situation, and you show up every day, and you wake up, and you choose to see the good in the world, and you keep wanting, like, how beautiful. And it was that question, like, what is beautiful about what you've been able to do, or what is unique or different, or like difficult or challenge, like, what is it that makes the way you handled it different from maybe anybody else, right? Like, it's not, it's that's seeing yourself, is to acknowledge that your unique way of being influenced the way you went through any of those areas of your life. Any, the career, there's a unique version of you that did it your way. You know what I mean? And to be able to acknowledge it and see it and talk about it. And then I read it back to myself because okay, now read it like it is you. And I was just like, that had a profound impact on me because I couldn't believe, first of all, that I got through the exercise, like that I was able to like go through it to the point where I felt like satisfied, where I said everything I needed to say to this person. And then to read it back, like, oh my God, why did it take so long for me to talk to myself this way? For me to see these things about me, for me to like celebrate who I am and what I've done and how I've done it. It wasn't like the achievements themselves. It was more like how I responded to the challenges and to the struggles and the reasons that I felt that those things were important. Like what moved me. It was really about connecting with my heart at that point, as opposed to like the achievement itself. It was like, look, you were so curious or you were so committed. Like it was those things, not like you got that increase at your
Yeah.
job. Good job. You know,
Yeah.
good job. You got to get those salary increases. Like, you know what I mean? That's really when I realized, oh, that's what it means to see yourself. And then from that point, I did it once. So now I have to practice doing it again and again. And it's hard when you weren't modeled that behavior. Like my mom, I see it so much now. I don't think I was ever aware of it before. Like I hear her talking to herself, like, oh, what an idiot, I did this, or I was so stupid when I did this thing. And I don't think I ever picked up on that till now. Like, wow, no wonder you're so mean and judgmental and critical of everyone else. That's how you feel about yourself too. And for the longest time, I was that way. I learned that. And so I needed different words to be modeled for me because those words became my eternal words, whether I wanted them or not. Like it just became the norm. And I didn't have other words until, I had a therapist that gave me other words, or I had a partner that gave me other words. Um, and so I think learning to speak to yourself that way, it sounds really easy, but if you don't have like a good way of practicing it, it's like it feels impossible, honestly. For me, it felt impossible for a long time. Did you go through an experience that allowed you to start to speak to yourself differently?
Yeah, and that's gosh, just this is so good right now because I just had this conversation like 2 nights ago. With like what I was modeled is the same thing. I would catch myself going down the highway and going, "You're such an idiot, you're so stupid." And again, I talked about like we talked about the growth and the maturity because we've learned the lessons, we've, done the exercises just like you were just talking about. But that doesn't mean like it's complete. So I have someone close to me and she always says that, like, don't talk to my friend like that. And so the exercise, that's the point I was getting to, is like where you did that. What it reminds me of is like, how do we learn to talk to ourselves in that loving, caring manner to recognize not the accomplishments, even though those can be great, but like you said, what was behind them, or the hard work, or like who you are as a person, like that creativity, that ingenuity, like all of those things that brought you to this place that even made you aspire to do that, and that you're a great mom. It's like on top of that, you're a great mom. And so when you're talking about that whole exercise, I loved it because I saw, I have this really pretty mirror, and it's only about this big. And it's the one like before I run out the door, I'm going to check and see if I have spinach in my teeth or whatever, because I can look in that mirror and see the imperfection, or I can see if I'm ready to go out and face the world. And I think that's what, when you're having that conversation and writing it down makes it tangible, but speaking to yourself and recognizing like no, you did this. You're amazing. You accomplished great things. Like you're modeling great things for your daughter. Just the creativity that you showed in tackling that project. And like, look what that displayed for your team, talking to yourself in that way. And so, and this is really emotional. So I have this one exercise we do, and it's writing a letter to yourself. And every time that exercise is done, whoever the women are, they're like, everybody cries. And I think, like, why didn't I bring Kleenex? Because I don't know why it's so difficult for us to talk to ourselves in that way. And it ends with, remember that one time you achieved this. And that sentence, it's like a fill in the blank, that sentence never ceases to blow my mind because every scenario is different. But everyone is like, how are you not celebrating this great accomplishment, like overcoming drugs or picking yourself up after your husband passed away, or like everything they write is so huge, but they've never taken the time to write this out and read this letter to themselves and say, look at you, look what you have accomplished. And so what it reminded me of is in the Bible, there's a scripture and it says, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but one day we will see him face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And I think it's this journey. I think it's like when you come to like a dirty mirror and you do the Windex and you clean it off. And it's like every time we come and acknowledge these things, which are the way he created us in the first place. And we read that letter and we're like, look at you, look what you did. And it's like, we're looking in the mirror. That's what I never grasped. It's like, we're looking at the reflection of this amazing creation that God made, the beautiful woman that he created us to be. And we're admitting like, wow, you're amazing. You're accomplishing these things. Remember that time you overcame this, or, look at how you navigated through this. These are the skills and the gifts and the talent and the personality that he gave you to come into the world. And it's like, and now we're just acknowledging, and even at my age, like I said, I'm like growing in wisdom, I'm just seeing in part. And one day, like all the barriers are going to be gone, and we're going to see, we're going to be fully known, like how he intended for us to be. It's like when you look at your daughter, like you see all of the talent, you see all the capability, you see all the potential, you see like every facet of her personality, and you're like, why are you so upset with yourself? Can't you see what I see? And that's what we're going through with God. So I mean, if we had just one takeaway from this whole thing, I wish every woman would do that exercise that you talked about writing it down. And then, as if somebody's talking to you, and then read it to yourself and acknowledge these things, acknowledge the great things, acknowledge the value, acknowledge the beauty, and stop beating ourselves up. That what kind of friendship would we have if we said every toxic thing that we say to ourselves to our friend? What kind of
Yeah.
relationship would that be? So
Oh my God. You said so many things that brought up things for me, like the mirror, right? One of the things I started to do for anybody that follows Mel Robbins that wrote the high five habit.
yeah,
So I started, and then I paired that with somebody else that I can't remember who it was that I had seen like an Instagram reel. I was like, oh, I'll try it. So you know how they say like every time you do something that you've never done, you start to like create new neural pathways, right? And so I started to brush my teeth in the mirror with my left hand, which was the exercise he had us do. And while you're watching yourself do this, you're also bilateral stimulation because you naturally will alternate eye, like you can't look at both eyes at the same time when you look in the mirror. You actually naturally look at one and then the other. That's actually a natural thing. And so you're reprogramming your mind by then telling yourself, I love you in the mirror 10 times. And then I paired it with Mel Robbins' high five, right? And I remember when I first started doing this, it was super uncomfortable. Like, I would look at myself in the mirror and it was like I did not want to say I love you. First, the first few times I would like breeze through it. I'd be like, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Okay, bye bye. You know what I mean? But then like because it felt so weird and whatever, but then I started to like notice that I would really see myself in that reflection, and it brought tears to my eyes like, okay, I really don't love myself today. Or wow, I can love this person in the mirror that had a hard, life, or had like really is striving for joy, like really is working towards creating a life that she could be proud of. Like, seeing those things in the reflection, I would start to see like, the wrinkles start to show up, or, like just see like I really did see it that way. Like, oh my God, 30 something years have passed of my life, and they're inside of me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're a part of me, and that little girl is also in me, and I see her too. You know what I mean? And I always talk about like nature when I love to spend time in nature and the ocean and waterfalls and go hiking. And every time I do, I feel closer to God because I say nature is God's uh, masterpiece. Like it's his canvas. I see it. I see God's work out there. And then somebody once said, um, God created, the stars and the universe and everything, and still thought that the world needed one of you too, right? And I was like, wow, to look at it that way, to look at your reflection and to say, like, God felt the world was missing one of me too. Like, how can I honor that and really acknowledge that? Like, how can I put myself down for all my flaws and whatever, and yet I was made so intentionally this way, right? That it's part of what makes me different. Things like my ADD, or, my quirkiness or my clumsiness, like all my little things that I would just reject. I've learned to kind of like, okay, well, there's no other one of me in the world, and those are part of what makes me me, right? That kind of way of looking at it. But the mirror thing is another like exercise, right? Also, when you talked about like don't talk about my friend that way, it also reminded me of another exercise of like naming that voice when you hear it come up, it's like name it and tell it like we're not think or even acknowledging, okay, I hear you, you're trying to keep me safe here, this is the pattern, but I choose not to listen to you. Right, it's like no thank you. That we are not talking to ourselves that way today. There's a book, something, how to train tame your gremlin, I think it is. It's like you call it the gremlin, you could call it your parents' voice, you could call it whatever, but to like dissociate, like not associate so closely with that. Like that's not you. Like that's like a coping mechanism for that you learned, right? And then also I wrote down the whole letter to yourself. You reminded me when you talked about that exercise of I went to an event once where she had us write a thank you letter.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, that's right. I forgot about this exercise. A thank you letter to yourself, which was a different like angle, but also was very transformative. It's like, thank you to myself for showing up in these ways, right? Like, thank you for not giving up. Thank you for continuing to do the work. Thank you that um you take care of your body. Thank you. All the things that you do that you don't acknowledge, and thanking yourself for it. It was another kind of like different exercise. Um I wonder, I should probably pull that up at some point and maybe read it on the podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, like to sit down in quiet and to think about what you would thank yourself for is another way to kind of see yourself too. What if you're really struggling with that? Um, I I think part of this seeing ourselves is like acknowledging the good, and we've talked about this too. Is like that doesn't only mean seeing ourselves in these ways, but also on the journey to the thing that you're achieving, are you actually celebrating your small wins?
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. Like we're recognizing this, for those people that feel like I'm striving, doing all the things, and I'm still not happy, or when is it gonna be enough? When do I feel like I've arrived? And so yeah, we were talking about maybe giving them some action items to feel like, to recognize, like we just stopped and talked about like recognizing when you're holding in, that tense energy or whatever and dealing with that. But celebrating the small wins, I say that all the time. And I mean, and on a lot of my podcasts, because I'm like, okay, when you accomplish this, when you write your mission statement, like, don't forget to celebrate the small wins because I feel like that person that's talking in the mirror is always like, well, that's not good enough. Well, that's probably not what I was supposed to do, or that's probably not right. And it's like, why can't you just celebrate that you accomplished it? Why can't you just celebrate that you made it all the way through this podcast? That you're even showing up, that you even care, that you're even trying, that you're asking the questions. And I think we don't, especially as women. I feel like we don't do that enough. And so, yeah, celebrating the small wins, acknowledging, and we were talking about that. Like my example was noticing that even though I didn't do something, how in my mind, when I started, I thought it would look like, I've come to that point where I was like, hey, I've made it a year. I've done this. In fact, I had a huge win. I think I told you yesterday. It's like, I'm going to go, back to the gym or whatever. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited. And I have to have all the apps that like have the confetti. Yay, you hit your stats for the day to help me remember, whatever it takes to help you remember to celebrate. You did it. You actually did it. You showed up and not to just bypass that and go on to the next box you could check.
Yeah, I love after you said the confetti. I actually went to a women's conference where she was talking about the importance of celebration. And I've been really trying to focus on that a lot because I noticed, especially, I did a marathon, right? I trained for this thing. I like did all the work for it and then I didn't meet my time goal and it was all I could think about. I'm like, "Oh my God, I've done so much work and yet why am I not able to celebrate this for me? Like why what is it that is keeping me from being able to fully acknowledge?" And it really is just that, like, the only one that's keeping you is you. And so break the pattern by breaking the pattern. Like, let's really think about what was great about this. What did you overcome? How did you show up? And so at the conference, she asked everybody, what are some things that you guys do, to celebrate? And dance party. But somebody said fake confetti. Like throw out fake confetti. Like just to rewire your brain. Like we're happy about this, right? And she mentioned that she has a jar that she like writes down like her accomplishments on like a little post-it and she puts it in the jar. And so back to what you said that our kids learn from us. Like we're modeling for them how to be with themselves. And so I took my daughter to the store and went looking for a jar and I found these mason jars. And then I got stickers. And then we both decorated our, what do we call them? Celebration jar. This is our celebration. This is my celebration jar. Mia has hers upstairs. But it's like little reminders of like, let's actually focus on the positive, on the wins. You did it, happy thoughts, love yourself. Like, to be really intentional about it, not just like, yeah, I'm happy for myself. Like make a party of it in some way. Like make it feel like you're really happy for yourself. When your kid shows you a drawing, like there was a whole study on this, like when you show someone your work, there was three different scenarios. One, they just threw it in the garbage. The other one is like, oh, they glanced at it and they put it aside. And the third one, they looked at it and they described it and they talked about what's good about it and what I like the colors here. I see that you did this there. And it makes such a difference in that person's like motivation to keep going when the person that actually had their work acknowledged and was observed and like they gave all the detailed feedback on why it was great versus the one, first of all, the one that just gets thrown in the garbage, the one that just gets glances at and put aside, and then the one that got that like real celebration. And that's what celebration is. It's like the acknowledgement of like the journey, like what you did and how it was different and what you know, like I would probably describe it as like dwelling, like sitting in it, like actually feeling the joy as opposed to just like, oh yeah, I did this and move on, right? Like revel in it a little bit. And so like I'm starting to do that. That could be something you guys do too. But like, what are the ways that you can celebrate in a way that like reprograms your mind and your nervous system, right? That really makes an impact, that breaks that pattern. Um, and that's hard, right? Like that's hard to do because, um, we have these long-standing patterns that are deep-rooted in subconscious beliefs. Um, and so that's probably like one of the last points I'll make. But along with this one is like it's not about the end goal all the time. It's about, right?
Yeah, it's about the journey, but the journey has to have mile markers. Like I taught my grandson when we were driving from 2 hours away to my house, like to recognize the mile marker. So it's like, oh, we've gone 5 miles. Like, oh, I accomplished this. So he can learn to train his brain that it's not an endless journey. Like there are markers that say, I achieved this, I achieved this. And I think one of my things, because it also goes with the first conversation we had as far as celebrations, like okay, I'm gonna get a massage or I'm gonna get like, like a therapeutic, bubble bath or whatever, and just and in that turning myself off, how hard I had to set a timer the other day to stay in the tub. It's like, no, you're because it's like, okay, I'm done. I have to get on to the next project. But to retrain ourselves is like, no, you deserve this. Like you worked hard. You need to like reward yourself, celebrate in a way that's also like self-care. Like you said about the little child, what are we telling ourselves when we're taking the time to say, you did a great job? Like don't just keep at that heightened state and go and go and go and go. It's the same thing with running. Like if you don't take care of yourself along the way, what's going to happen? Eventually you're going to break down. And so that's something that I like to do as celebrating the mile markers or whatever, doing some like self-care, which is, win-win because we need it. But then I'm telling myself, like, when you achieve this, I'm going to recognize that and celebrate you. What's another thing? Because I know that was the, celebrating the wins. What's another thing that we could, suggest to these people that are just going and going?
I think related to that was the progress, right? The progress is better than the perfection. Like rather than continuing to focus on like what's wrong with it and why it's not ready, it's like, okay, I made some progress today. I am like you said, those little steps that get along the way, um, being able to call it done rather than keeping to keep aspiring for that perfection, because you are setting kind of like an like an unmanageable like attainable goal if you're still looking for that perfection, because you mentioned that was one of your challenges is that nothing ever felt good enough. And I struggled with that too, and I still do, like the marathon, right? It's like, okay, anytime that I write a piece of content, anytime that I do or an email, like anytime I'm working on something and I find that it's taking me a long time, I'm like, call it done, because done is better than perfect, or call it, like the progress, because this email is still better than the last email, is better than the one before that, right? Or this piece of content is still better than the last. That's the progress you're making, but you can't progress if you never finish anything, if you never like. that for me was like, okay, this is progress. It's still better than the last time, and it's actually getting out there as opposed to sitting on my desk for the next month, 2 months, 3 months. Like that's where dreams go to die is in perfection.
Yeah, that was the death of me, because I am a dreamer. And so I have all these dreams and aspirations. And like I said, I don't see myself as the high achiever, but I have a lot of aspirations. And then I would start to work on something and I was like, okay, that's not good enough. And let's talk about this book that I started writing 10 years ago. Another thing. But it was like this.
Yeah.
Do you do a podcast? Is the lighting right? Do you have this? And I even talk to people too, and they're like, well, I'm gonna build a studio, I'm gonna do this. I'm like, okay, but when are you gonna do the thing? Because that was me. And I had a friend call me out like years ago, and we were doing whatever was the current craft project or whatever. And I was still working on mine. I was still working on mine. And she's like just knocking them out. And she said, okay, yours may look better whenever you finally get it finished, but at least mine are done. And it's what you just said.
Yeah. That
So
stings.
that was my realization moment. It's like, am I going to keep, well, this needs one more flower, it needs better lighting, or like you said, I'm going to edit it one more time before I email it out. And then it never gets sent. It never gets done. It never gets uploaded. Yeah, there's just, I think it feeds procrastination, because you say, when I am able to do it perfect, then I'll finish it. But then you never finish it. And so you
Mhm.
have all of these things that you've never accomplished, which is the exact opposite of this, because you're wanting it to be perfect. And that is so unrealistic. And I think, what did you say?
Yeah.
That is better than perfect.
Done is better than perfect, or progress is better than perfect. Progress because it, it's like the deep-rooted fear is that we're going to make a mistake or that we're not going to be good enough, right? Like um we're hoping that we don't fail, right? But the bar is too high. That we'll fail at being perfect every time. Nobody is perfect. And it's like they say, there are people far less qualified, far less, experienced, far less everything that you are out there doing the thing and actually like getting better at it while you haven't done anything. And they're actually impacting lives. Like, as a dreamer, you talk about books and things like that. Like, there are books being written by far less qualified people. And then it doesn't, that's the other thing is that all or nothing thinking. It's like it has to be the book, right? Because I struggle with the same thing when I talk about writing the book. And it's like, you know what? You could always write another one.
Yes, or the podcast, or
Yeah.
whatever. And I was laughing because, oh my gosh, I just lost my thought. Sorry. Oh, going back to what my friend said, it's just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna write the book, but it's not gonna be good enough. And then you see somebody, like you said, that they're doing it imperfectly. And I think imperfect is actually more attractive than perfection when you put it out there because it's relatable. But you're thinking, but
Human.
yeah, yeah, all of us, all of us. But when I see that, when I start that comparison trap of like, yeah, people that, well, it's like they did that, but it wasn't, like I would have done it better or different, but did I?
Right.
They
Oh,
actually got it done, and I'm
right.
over here thinking like, how can I do it perfectly? And I think that's been another motivation for me recently. It's like when I look at people and it's like, okay, you said you were going to do this, you said you're going to do this, like, but what have you done towards that? Or what are you waiting for to be
Yeah.
able to step out and actually do that? So yeah, I like at least making progress, at least setting a goal and action steps toward that dream, and recognizing, just like the hunched shoulders, just recognizing along the way, okay, why am I not moving forward on this? What's holding me back? And if it's that perception that it has to be better or perfect before you take the next action step, then that's ridiculous. Because when I was running, I was never worried about my time because my time was never good. but I have a lot of medals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was probably more proud of you. Yeah, when I saw that, when I saw that on social media about you running, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so excited because
Oh,
how hard that was. Yeah.
like,
That's been
and
fun.
I think that's where like the pain is for me is like I lived so much of my life. I think exercise will highlight, by the way, all of your subconscious beliefs and how you handle stress at a much faster rate than like real life challenges. Because here I was thinking I had done all this work and I was getting so much better and I talked to myself so good. And then like I ran the marathon and I was like, I wanted to have that reaction. I wanted to be like, yeah, yeah, I did it. This is awesome. And instead, like, my pattern came back, and I was like, "Ugh, I didn't get the time that I wanted. My earphones went out on mile 15, like, which was really hard after that, by the way. And it comes down to like, can we identify what is the subconscious belief underneath it all? Right? And is it like it's different for everyone, but I know some of mine were like, I'm not enough. Like I'm not worthy. I'm not worth. And when you say worthy, it's love. Like what we aspire for as kids is the love of our parents, and that kind of continues on through life is and what does love feel like, right? It feels like warmth and acceptance and like caring and validation, right? Like that, like this like feeling that you are like wonderful and special and great, like that you have value. And that's the other thing is like I don't have I think the underlying belief was always like I didn't have value. Like I had to prove my value. I had to work enough. I had to, like I just, and so once you identify that, it is about healing the pain that brought it on. And I think that you could do with a therapist, you could do with a coach, you could do with like just having the space to feel and acknowledge like the pain that got you there allows you then to move through it and choose different, right? Um, I think associated to that is like help community, like having someone model these things for you, like you give you the words to use that you don't have for yourself yet. Because honestly, like I couldn't have trained for that marathon without help, right? Like there's just no way to put in the miles being a single mom, right? And so there was so many times that I saw that wound come up too. Like I have to do everything by myself. It's all or nothing, right? And I realized, oh my God, if I really want to run this marathon, I really need to lean on some people. And it was like so hard, it made me so uncomfortable. But the only way to break that is to do different. And like it's not easy to do different because your nervous system thinks that is not safe. Going full circle to the beginning. And so I think it is about like training your nervous system to see safety in the things that felt previously really unsafe before. And I would guess that a lot of high achievers don't like to ask for help, don't like to like, have people that they lean on. I think for a long time I thought I had all the answers too. Like I'll just read a book, I'll just watch some YouTube videos. And there's this whole different aspect of being in relationship with someone who can give you that connection and model for you the thing that wasn't modeled, right? Growing up.
I want to stay on this race analogy because I want us to go back to that community, but I love it that we both ran ran races. Is that right? I'm just gonna say marathons, even though mine were halves. Because this is what this high achiever thing, this is what it looks like to me when I see people striving and striving and striving and not talking to themselves in a healthy manner, not recognizing their successes, not celebrating the wins, as they go along the way. I told you earlier what it reminds me of is somebody running a race like this, and the finish line keeps moving, and who is moving the finish line. And I can't even imagine what that does to your nervous system, because you think, well, once I have this title, or once I have this job, or once I have this house, and then they keep striving, they keep going, and they're not celebrating. I crossed the finish line. I got a medal. They just keep going for the next thing, and they never stop to rest. They never stop to celebrate. Um, I don't know what it takes to stop and recognize, even people that are box checkers, stop and recognize, like, I completed that step. I made it to this finish line, whether it's like a 5K. I use this analogy a lot in coaching about setting goals as if you were running a marathon. What does it take? You don't go out and run 26.2 miles. You have to start, if you're like couch to 5K, you have to start out with the first mile. And it's like, okay, yay, I ran my first mile. And then you build up to, the 3, and then you build up to 5. And then it's like every time that's a finish line, celebrate that accomplishment. And then it's like, what's the next goal? Because it may be like, for a young person, graduating high school, and then getting a degree in college, and then pursuing that career, and then, having that title, and then, having a family or whatever. But don't just keep moving the finish line like, I haven't arrived, I haven't arrived, I haven't arrived, because you never will. If that is what you're looking for, you're never going to arrive. The finish line will always move, because there's always going to be something more. There's going to always be something that you haven't achieved or attained. And that is the scariest thing for me. And I'm not saying like sit back on your couch and just stop trying. I mean, don't hear that. It's not that. But it's this constant pressure to keep going and keep achieving, and never having arrived, and to get to that point, like, what am I doing this all for anyway? And we talked about that at the beginning, like having all the stuff. If it's about the big house, I've already checked that box. If it's about the super nice, luxury car, I've already checked that box. And I'm fine having, less of a car now. I'm happier now, even though I've like checked off so many of the boxes, you know what I mean? And so I think truly recognizing what it takes. And that's why I love going back to the race when you were talking about having that community. Because when I envision a race, I envision like all of the people on the sidelines with the signs and cheering you on, or like, just like, you can do this. So talk about community and how that felt for you, in the race, but how that parallels to what we're doing in real life.
Yeah. I think the support during the race, when you talk about, I'm going to have the founder of this company join me on a podcast episode, because I was so really moved by this experience, especially how it related it to when I really wanted to have connection with Juan when he was in the hospital under um, basically a respirator, under basically a coma. You have to put you in a coma to be able to intubate you like that way. And I wanted to be able to connect with him in some way because of COVID. And so this app, Holler Hype, I got to it through a half marathon that was offering it. And so actually on all my long runs, I would use this app. And the way it would work is that through your headphones, while you're listening to music, you would go live. And when you're live, people can send you voice notes, and the music will go down on your headphones and you will hear their messages. And it made such a difference for me because I had my daughter on there, I had my sister, my parents, my boyfriend. And it is like literally the voice in your head is different from your little girl, from your sister, from whomever that's really wanting to inspire you and tell you that you can do it. And so it is changing the voice in your head, right? And this experience, relating it back to the race, it made such a difference. And yes, when my headphones went out, the music went out, which makes it really hard. But also, I lost that. But my sister joined me for the last 4 miles. She ran it alongside me, and just holding her hand through that I had never done anything like that with my little sister before, you know? And so to lean on someone that way makes such a difference. And life is a marathon, right? Like we are going through our lives this way, and we do need people. And I've walked alongside people as a coach, and I understand what it's like to be on the receiving end of that and why it's so meaningful and important because I've had coaches myself and that got me through really hard times. And that allowed me to like grow in different ways and like see different perspectives because my perspective was based on old patterns, based on old wounds. And so it is so important and it has made a difference for me. And I think maybe we'll end there, kind of like of all the things that we talk about today, at minimum, like building a circle around you of people that believe in you and talk to you in ways that you want to talk to yourself, that model celebration, that model being proud of themselves so that you can kind of learn from that, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to end. And if we could just imagine in life, going through life with those headphones on and the people that we love cheering us on because they're doing it audibly, but we don't listen. So yeah,
Oh,
paying
yeah.
attention to what they're saying as they cheer us on. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, actually, and as you talk about like EMDR, we talked about earlier, when you're
Yeah.
running or walking and that bilateral stimulation of both sides of the brain and hearing it, it does help reprogram your mind. Like even if it's not your voice, sometimes borrowing someone else's is so important. So
Thank you for
holler
tuning
height
into today's
is another,
episode of Courage and Purpose.
kind of
I hope today's
exercise you could
insights
do
inspired you
is
to
give
take bold
people the
action and
opportunity
align your
to be the
life
voice
and
in your head
career
during
with what
those uphill
truly
struggles.
matters to you.
Yeah.
If you're ready to dive deeper, I invite you to download my free action
That should be
indicator
a meme.
assessment, a powerful tool to help you uncover
Yes.
what's holding you
All right,
back
Carolina,
and
thank
take
you
the
so much.
next
This has
step
been
towards
awesome.
clarity and
I have to
confidence.
actually go get
Just
my
visit
daughter.
www.lifeonpurpose.coach/action
definitely do
indicator
it
to
again
get started today.
soon.
We will.
If
We
you
will.
found value
Talk to you
in
later.
today's
Thanks,
episode,
Carolina.
please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who could use a little extra courage on their journey. Until next time, stay true to your purpose, lead with courage, and keep thriving. I'll see you in the next episode.